fabulous marathon man, a local chap who has done a marathon or more than one marathon, and Andrew has as well. So I'll hand you over to our speakers for the evening.
That's good, a round of applause and Andy will start again. Hello everybody, thanks for inviting me along. I do know a few of you, so it's nice to see a few familiar faces. I do live in the village. I've lived in the village since I was 2, so you perhaps know me more than I know you, some of you. But nice to see you all. Thanks for inviting me along. Angela's asked me to come along and just talk around my experience of running the London Marathon, which I did on April the 21st this year. So just to give you a bit of detail about that, I will say there's lots to running the London Marathon. It's more than just turning up on the day. So I'll try and give you a bit of background information about what goes into the preparation and the training for it. Hopefully won't send any of you to sleep. So Andrew said I've got to talk for about 30 minutes, I think. And I was thinking, how am I going to talk about running for 30 minutes? So we'll see. So do tell me if I'm dragging on. Has anybody been to the London Marathon? Anybody run the London Marathon? No? Not necessarily this year. Who watered you? Well, if I need some help on any questions, Alan, you can help me out at the end. No, so that's right.
It's a charity. It's a charity walk.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Karen did it for her knees, and she had Karen's daughter-in-law had some serious knee work done, and wanted to prove to herself she could do it, so 4 of us went, and we walked the course.
Oh, this shouldn't be new to you then, you should know all about it. I mean, what I'll start, I suppose there's 2 aims I had this year at the marathon. Firstly, to raise money for charity, which I think a lot of people do, obviously London Marathon for. This year I ran for Macmillan Cancer Support, and my aim was to try and raise £1,000. So that was the target going into it. And my other aim, because I do a lot of running, was to try and do it competitively. And the ultimate challenge, I think, with the marathon is to try and get under 3 hours. So my target this year was to try and break 3 hours with the marathon. It's something I've done before. I've run sub-3, but it becomes ever more challenging as the years tick on. So that was my challenge, to run it as quickly as I could this year. I have had good and bad experiences of the marathon, which I'll try and share with you some of those. The bad tend to stick in the memory more than the good. But I will say, I mean, the women around here will say that probably childbirth is the toughest thing that you ever experience in your lifetime. But for me, not having been through that, London Marathon has been my toughest challenge, both physically and mentally. A lot of people sort of understand the fact that it can be physically challenging, but for me, the mental side of it is the hardest bit. There's nothing harder than trying to run when all of your body is telling you it doesn't want to run, and it plays strange tricks on your mind. So, yeah, so firstly I'll give you a bit of history about the London Marathon, for anybody who doesn't know too much about it. The first marathon was in March 1981, so this year was the 33rd London Marathon. You'll see from the little literature and everything, it's now sponsored by Virgin. So if you do go down to London on London Marathon weekend, you'll see Virgin literature absolutely everywhere. Previously it was sponsored by Flora, originally it's by Gillette. The basics of the course, for anybody that doesn't know, it's a flat course around the River Thames, north and south of the river, and it's 26.2 miles long. And that 0.2 makes all the difference. London's a very big marathon. It's it's the biggest marathon in the world. It's one of the 5 major marathons, along with Boston, Berlin, Chicago, and New York. So what that means is you get a complete and utter mixture of people competing, from your fun runners to your charity runners to the best runners in the world. And it really does have a broad range of people attending. And it is a huge number of people. I think the first marathon in 1981 had 6,255 people complete the course. 2012 there was 36,748 finishers. So you know, there's an awful lot of people running the course. Also spectating. For me, one of the biggest things is the level of support you get. And there's over 1 million people lining the streets of London, and I can honestly say for the whole 26 miles, there's people lining the course. So if you ever get the chance to go, it is an excellent day out just to watch and savour the atmosphere. Because I've been to lots of sporting events, and you get a mixture. You go to watch football games, rugby games, and you get a strange atmosphere because you get people supporting one side or the other. The one thing about London is that everybody there, all 1 million people, are supporting every single runner, and the atmosphere it creates and is just superb to behold. So, very good day out if you ever get the chance to go down. From a charity point of view, obviously a lot of people know London from the charity point of view. Since its launch in 1981, that's the first ever joint finish on that one. But over 450 million has been raised for good causes via running the London Marathon. So it holds the Guinness World Record for the largest annual fundraiser in the world. So it's a huge, huge event for charities. Great demand to get into it. Last year there were 150,000 applicants, of which 50,000 were successful, but only 72% of those made it to the start line, which I think indicates one of the biggest challenges is not getting into it, but is being fit for the start line, because you tend to find with the preparation and the training that it's very easy to get injured and not be able to make it for the day, because preparation is the key. You really don't want to be attending and taking part if you're not physically prepared for it. There are a number of ways to get into it, for anybody that is interested. Firstly, there's a ballot. The ballot opens 1 week after the previous marathon, so it opened this year on the 28th of April. 125,000 places in the ballot for 12,000 places in the race. So you've got a 1 in 10 chance roughly of getting in by the ballot, and that filled up this year within 16 hours. So it's ultimate level of demand to try and get into it. So it's a hard way of getting into it by the ballot. I got into it this year under a scheme called Good for Age, which means for each age range that you look at, there's a qualifying time that you can run which qualifies you for it. So for me, I was 40 this year. I know it's hard to believe. I have to do it in sub 3 hours 15, and having done it in sub 3 hours last year, that got me in for this year, and it gets me in for next year as well. You can be, for anybody who wants to join a running clubs like Ramsey Road Runners, of which I'm a member, they get places each year. It varies. This year it was 1 place for one of its members. Historically we've had it where it's been 2 members. Or you can run it for a charity. You can approach a charity, because the charities, particularly the big charities, will get a number of places in the race. They'll look for people to run for them, and they'll ask for a certain amount to be raised. It could be 1,200, it could be 2,500, it depends on the charity, but it tends to be the big charities that get those places. So I'll mention it at the end, but one of the things I'm after for future years is local charities, smaller charities that can't get those places but would like somebody to run for them. So, but I'll cover that at the end. So variety of ways of getting into it, variety of runners as well that run, from your experienced runners like myself and Andrew. There's more experience than us though. I mean, there's now 15 all-timers who have run every marathon, every London marathon since its launch. The eldest being 79. So I think. Yeah. It just. I mean, one of the things that really attracted me to running was the fact that you can run at any age. I appreciate it becomes harder the older you get, and I am appreciating that more and more. But it's just the sort of sport that we have any age can take part and can compete, and whether you walk it, jog it, part run it, or run it flat out, it's a really good mixture of different people and age ranges. But as I said earlier, what it does get as well is the elite runners. There's a complete and utter mixture and range, but I mean, give you an example, Mo Farah, who I'm sure people know, he ran half of it this year, which was very nice to be able to just run half of it. But he's obviously committed to running it next year as well. £450,000 he's getting paid. I can assure you I didn't get paid that. I had to pay the £35 entry fee like anybody else. But you do get a mixture. Paula Radcliffe, she set the world record for the women at the London Marathon, so it's a fast course as well. A few statistics about it. This is my cheerful slide, by the way. This is to make everybody feel better about themselves. This is really just highlights the fact that you need to be prepared for it. Sorry to be a doom and gloom merchant, but the key is being prepared for the day. Because if you don't get it right, if you don't plan right, you don't prepare right, and you haven't put the training in, the consequences can be quite serious. And I don't laugh and joke about it, but St John's Ambulance lining the course, and the number of times you see people falling over and receiving assistance in front of you is quite scary. But yeah, 1 in 6 contact with St John's Ambulance, 1 in 800 will end up in A&E, 1 in 10,000 admitted to hospital, and there's been 11 fatalities since the launch of London Marathon. So it's not something that's nice, but it just highlights the key that it is a serious event, and the key is being prepared for it. A bit about the course. I'll talk a bit more about the course. As I said, it runs north and south of the river. It starts on the south towards Greenwich Park, works its way round past the Cutty Sark, if anybody knows where the Cutty Sark is, through Bermondsey. Halfway point is at Tower Bridge, which is always nice. Tower Bridge, if you ever run the marathon, is a great point because that's where the crowds really make a noise. So you know you're coming out north of the river into the second half of the event, and although there's crowds throughout the south of the river, that last bit, particularly along the embankment, is extremely well supported and noisy. Throughout the course for the runners, there's mile markers, so we know exactly where we are distance-wise. Each mile marker will have water stations for refreshments, and clocks to give you an idea of how you competed. But as I said, I'll talk a bit more about where it goes. You do see a number of sites, which is always nice for anybody who wants to do a bit of sightseeing while they're tooting around the marathon. I've got to be honest, one year I did this, and I think the first year I did it, and my wife said, "Oh, did you see this? Did you see that?" I've got to be honest, I saw nothing. I just saw the person in front of me. I'd run over Tower Bridge, didn't see the Tower of London or anything. But you do see nice things. Cutty Sark is always a busy part of the course, probably the busiest bit south of the river. As I said, you've got Tower Bridge to go over. Canary Wharf, it's always one of the toughest bits because I'll show you the route again in a bit, but you come over the bridge and then you run away from the finish. And it's the bit where naturally they say your body can last about 18 miles on the energy that it can store. Well, 18 miles is about Canary Wharf, so that means in Canary Wharf your body's starting to pack in. And then I suppose the best bit, as I said, is down the embankment where you'll see Big Ben, you'll see London Eye. The last 200 metres you come past Buckingham Palace and it finishes on the Mall opposite St James's Palace. So you do really get to see the centre of London if you're in a fit state to have a walk around. If anybody does want to do it, one key tip, have your name across your shirt. Something we always do. So people can call your name out. It makes a huge difference if you feel like stopping and there's millions of people shouting you and saying, "Don't stop, keep going." You almost feel obliged to keep running. So, hot tip for that one. I mean, that's a bit about London Marathon and a bit about why I do it. As I said, this year I was running for Macmillan Cancer Support. I have run, previously I've run for kidney research, I've run for children with leukemia as well. As I said, my target personally was to raise £500, but I'm very lucky I work for one of the banks. I don't normally get to say I'm lucky working for one of the banks, but the bank I work for, HSBC, will always match what I raise up to £500. So I know personally if I raise £500 that they'll add £500 to the total as well. So that was my objective for the course. So I was running it for two reasons. Firstly, to raise that money, and secondly, for my own personal challenge, really. I've always been sporty, I've always loved sport. I played football for a number of years, but when I had young family, found that the time commitment of that wasn't conducive with family life, and I wanted a sport that I could run whenever, or do whenever, when I had the time and fitting around everything else. So that's why I chose running. And I think when I packed up football, I looked at what ambitions I had in life, and one of the ambitions I'd always had was to run the London Marathon. So it really was the London Marathon that got me into running. And so what I did after packing in football, I thought, well, I'll enter the London Marathon, which I did in 2007. And I've got to be honest, I was totally unprepared for what lay ahead. But it's the start of running. You've got to start somewhere. And so 2007, I did London. My preparation wasn't great, my planning wasn't great. I'd done very little running beforehand, to be honest, and I felt the consequences of it on the day. It was a very hot day in 2007, so tough going. And I said earlier, one of the things your body can do is store enough energy to run 18 miles. My body stored enough energy to run 18 miles, but no further. It really didn't want to go any further. So 18 miles, I suffered from cramp. You'll see on there, I ran the first half in 1 hour 54. So I was on course for sub 4 hours on that time. But cramp set in. I ended up that last 8.2 miles really walking, running, and found it extremely tough. You'd be amazed what your mind does to you over those tough miles. I've got two vivid memories of that year, which aren't particularly pleasant. I didn't know whether to share with you, but the first one was I remember finishing, and I had to make a long walk to meet up with my wife and children who were somewhere around the course, and I'd arranged to meet up with them. And I was walking in opposite direction to all of the crowd that were walking the other way to get to the finish, and all I can remember doing is crying. And whatever I tried to do to stop myself crying made me cry even more. So I was walking on my own in tears, and I think it was just a mixture of the satisfaction of having getting round, but the relief and the emotional strain I put on myself in the last 8 miles to just get round that course. So it really did take an awful lot out of me emotionally, to the extent that when I saw my wife, I did say to her, never ever again, don't ever let me do it again. And I have gone on, and I've done 8 marathons now, and after each one I've always said to my wife, never again. Even this year I said, never ever again.
That's what women say in childbirth. But what I have found is that I have got hooked into it. I have enjoyed my running, and every year I say it, the time span before me changing my mind does change. I think I was less than 24 hours this year before saying, yes, I'm definitely doing it next year. So, but I knew after running that marathon that I had to do things differently to be more successful and find myself getting to the end of the marathon without breaking down into tears, really. So I looked at what I could do. One of the things I did, firstly, was join a running club. I joined a local, I don't know if anybody's ever come across, Ramsey Road Runners. Small club, very sociable club. Andrew's a member as well, and he's there for me. But just a very nice way of getting to spend time with other people who want to do the same things, sharing ideas, training with them, and just developing your running technique and skills, really. As I say, very small. We've got 90 members. We've got senior members of different ages, up to the 70s. I don't know if anybody knows Sandra Butler. She's local. Yeah, so Sandra did London again this year. So amazing achievements for her age. And her brother Tony Lack as well, who's in his 70s and has run lots of different. So we have a complete mix, down to 9-year-olds. So really good range of ages. But what I did find as well is it gave me access to the local running community, really, and I've been amazed at how big a sport it is locally. If you wanted to, you could do a race every weekend, somewhere within an hour's journey, and have 500 people in the race. It is just a huge, huge sport with lots of local running clubs, so it's really been good. The races vary from 5 kilometres to 20 miles, so you can pick and choose distances. They're all as painful as each other. But the most popular tend to be the 10 kilometres and the half marathons. Two of the more local ones, At Ramsey we organise a 10 kilometre at the end of June each year, which is always popular. And Peterborough has a half marathon in October that's, I think, has nearly 5,000 entries now. So it's a really big event. So some real good. But what it did to me, it got me doing all of those races and got me to the stage where I wanted to run more marathons. And what it gave me access to as well was more runners that run marathons. And you'll be amazed, I think. I mean, at Ramsey Race, there's 90 members, it's got 22 on there that have run marathons, 6 of which live in Warboys. So, yeah, so you've got lots of marathon runners in Warboys, which is good. Andrew's on there as well, so yeah, good mixture of abilities and times, ranging from, 3 hours to your 6.5 hours almost. But all of them have achieved, the London Marathon at whatever pace they set out to do it. But as I said, it got me back into it. The hardest bit was getting back into London. So what I did, first of all, I did a couple of other marathons. I looked at Edinburgh, so I ran the Edinburgh Marathon in 2009. I got my time down to 3 hours 18, so I took an hour off just by getting back into running with other clubs and doing different races. I did it again, Edinburgh, in 2009 and 2010, got it down to 3 hours 5 minutes. So I was getting ever closer to that 3 hour barrier, which really was where I wanted to be. But still suffering from cramp. It's still a challenge to get around all that course. But then 2010, I was lucky enough to get back into London. I got a ballot place into the London Marathon, so that gave me something to focus on. You'll see from there, obviously, there is lots of other marathons to do. Edinburgh is one that I've done. Myself and Andrew went to Amsterdam in October and we ran the Amsterdam Marathon. So it's a really good way of getting to see different parts of the UK and the world as well. So, but you speak to anybody running, I think they'll say to you, London is the ultimate marathon to do well at. So if I look at the next slide, it's really some of my details from London. After 2007, I got back in 2010. Proper planning, proper preparation for it, and I finally broke my 3 hour barrier. I did it in 2 hours 59 and 31 seconds. So really pleased, that was what I always wanted to achieve. Still suffering from cramp. You'll see on there that I think I slow up quite a bit towards the end, so still not perfected it. But 2010 went really well. But what it did do is lead me on to 2011, which was probably the ultimate learning experience for me with regard to London. Having done sub 3 hours in 2010, I felt that this is easy, I can do this every year. So 2011 I turned up thinking, having done all the training and the preparation, but thinking, well, I'll just go and run as fast as I can, and I'll get round and I'll do well. And it was extremely painful. If you look at the halfway stage, 2010 I was 1:27.18 seconds, 2011 1:24.37. So it doesn't sound a lot, but when you're running a half marathon at that sort of pace, 2.5 minutes is a big amount of time. So it was going really, really well, and then blew up big time, really painfully again. I felt the tears come in again, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. It really was not a nice experience as well. And I would say that year taught me how not to run a marathon, and it really emphasised the fact that you've got to get the preparation right, you've got to get the training right, but you've got to plan it as well. You've got to really have it as to how you're going to run that marathon and what times you want to do at what stage. So it set me up for this year, and this year I tried to build on the experiences that I'd experienced in the previous years to make sure I got it right. Now, there's some key bits in the preparation. Starts long before the day. As I said earlier, the toughest bit is the training. I've tried different training methods for London. The way I started off was to try and build up the mileage. Because everybody used to tell me it's about doing as much mileage as you can. And I used to start my training in November for an April marathon. Slowly build up the mileage till I was doing 50 miles a week, and then try and stick to 50 miles a week till 3 weeks before, when you start to taper and you start to wind down and rest a bit. It worked for a couple of years, but then I found for the last couple of years I've suffered quite severely with injuries.
and I think it's my body telling me I shouldn't be doing 50 miles a week, but I tend to break down when I hit that. So in Amsterdam last year, myself and Andrew tried something different. We tried, rather than focusing on the quantity, focusing on the quality of what we were doing, and just trying different things. So we started at 10 miles, running it at race pace, and each week we increased it by a mile, so that we got to 20 miles at race pace, and then we backed off from there. And it worked really well in Amsterdam, so I thought, when I got injured again in February this year, I thought, well, I'll stick to that. I won't bother about the 50 miles. I'll just build it up week by week. So that's what I tried this year. So that's key in the training. It's also key to have the right equipment. Good pair of running shoes, always key. Good running kit, comfortable running kit. It's not an expensive sport. Once you've got the right shoes and a bit of running kit, it's actually a cheap sport to take part in. But yeah, so there's key bits to the preparation there. Other things I focus on are diet. It's about, the only thing I eat on a race day after breakfast is gel bars, and I don't know if anybody's ever had a gel bar, but don't. Because they are the most disgusting thing to eat when you're not running a marathon. They are just pure. But when you're running a marathon at speed, the last thing you want to do is have to chew, so it's something you can get down you that gets you energy without having to work hard at it. But yeah, diet in the build-up is key. One of the things I always do is, before a marathon, my last drink before a marathon is on New Year's Eve, which my wife says makes me very boring for 3 or 4 months of the year. 112 days to be exact. 112 days of no alcohol. Drink lots of water, get your body well hydrated. Try and eat proper stuff, so lots of carbohydrates, lots of protein. Try and cut out the sugary bits, which to me I think is harder than the alcohol, to be honest. And you have to eat more, because for every 10 miles I run, I burn off 1,250 calories. So 10 mile run is half a day's worth of calories for me. So it is an excuse to eat more, but it's making sure it's the right stuff. But it's also about the mental side, as I said. It's about planning it out, having a plan of how you want the day to go, and making sure that you've got a clear view of what you're going to be doing. From a fundraising point of view as well, it's setting up getting paper-based fund for paper-based sponsor forms, websites. It's amazing in the days of I'm not very good with technology. That's why Andrew's here. But with Facebook and all these sort of things, how much easier it is to raise money sponsorship-wise as well. You can just put it on there, and people can sponsor you. So it's about getting yourself organised for everything. So this year preparation was going along as I would have hoped. So how did this year go? As I said, 2 targets. Try and break my personal best at 2:59.31. To be honest, I would have settled for 2:59.30. That would do for me. It's still a personal best, so that's good. It did start badly for me, if I'm honest, in preparation, in that I got injured in February and I missed 6 weeks training, so I wasn't overly optimistic. Also, I'm sure you'll notice, but the British weather this year wasn't particularly good over winter. One of the toughest things with London is it's in April, and you can always put money on the fact that the day of the London Marathon will be the hottest day of the year so far. All your training will have been done in the freezing cold. The amount of runs I did in the snow, wrapped up in layer after layer, to then come out and run in the heat makes it extremely difficult. There's a number of key races that I tend to do early in the year that are good build-up for it. There's a 15 mile at Folkesworth in January. There's a 30 kilometre at Stanford in February. And there's a 20 mile at Oakley in Bedfordshire in March, which are always pre-marathon runs that you try and do to build you up for the distance. Sadly, I missed Folkesworth. No, I didn't. Folkesworth was cancelled because of the snow. Stanford I missed through injury. And Oakley, again, it snowed. So I managed to miss all 3 races as well as being injured. So it wasn't great preparation, but we went down for the weekend. We made a weekend of it, myself and my wife. So I class it as a romantic weekend, but it was obviously it wasn't. We got to see a couple of shows and everything, and plenty of pasta to eat. You visit the expo the day before, which is very much an opportunity to pick up your number and see
lots of things that are going on for the weekend. But on the day, the race starts at 10 o'clock and it's south of the river. So it's up early for breakfast, porridge and bananas for me, if anybody was interested in what I ate. Plenty of water, which meant plenty of toilet stops as well on the way there. But it's then about getting across London, ready for the start.
What time did you have to get up?
I was up at, well, I'm always up early anyway, but I knew I had to have breakfast at least 3 hours before the race. So I was up at 6.
Too early for you, Dad.
Yeah, so it was an early start. But then I made my way across London with 36,000 others, so you can imagine what the trains were like. It's not a pleasant experience. Using the underground overground over to Greenwich Park. Now, because it's such a big event, it actually has 3 different starts. There's a red start, which has the good for age, which I was on, plus what we call the masses, so everybody else. Got the green start, which has got the elite, it's got the celebrities, so you can do a bit of celebrity watching on the green start, as well as some of the other good for age runners. And then you've got the blue start, which has got the elite runners, your Mo Farahs of this world, and again the masses. So spread out, they blend together at different stages of the race early on. The weather was warm, but it wasn't too hot, so that was quite nice. And I knew that to do my objective of under 3 hours, I needed to run consistently between 6:30 and 6:45 pace to get to 20 miles. If I got to that, I thought I could hang in and get myself 3 hours. So that was the target. Target was to be 1:27 at halfway, which was in line with what I did in 2010. So I won't spend too lot of time on the course, but this is the first part of the course where anybody can see. It's probably a bit small, to be honest. But that's south of the river through Bermondsey, Cutty Sark at 6 miles. Macmillan support, one of the big advantages of running for a big charity is that they will have supporters stationed all around the course. So absolutely brilliant in how they support. One of the things I did notice is at 4 miles I met up with somebody I knew on the course. I didn't plan to meet up with him, but he was running a similar pace. So from 4 miles to 17 I ran with him, and which helped. I did feel slightly embarrassed because I had my name over my shirt and he didn't. And running with somebody and where everybody's just calling your name and not his, I did feel a bit sorry for him. So my tip to him would be to get his name on his shirt next time. But yeah, so that was south of the river, going very well. I was going to plan, and I was pleased with how things are going. Where am I? As I said, cross the bridge at 12, and you'll see there, if you can see it, it then turns right away from the start, goes around Canary Wharf, the tough bit, and then loops back. Now, having done a few marathons, I know where to position my family and friends to give me the most support on the day. So my wife was at 14 miles, because I think that's just over halfway, where I probably need a little boost. But the good thing about it is that part of the course, you can actually see me at 21.5 miles as well, where I'm really desperate for the support. So I got to halfway feeling really good. Wanted to look really good at 14, so the wife was impressed. And it's still going well there. But once I got past there, that was the tough bit, because that's Canary Wharf, you're running away from everybody else. So really it was a situation of trying to dig in and do as well as I could to get to 22, 21.5 to see her, which I think was where Andrew was stationed as well. Got there, again feeling good, or as good as you can at 21.5 miles, and really just felt I just needed to dig in for that last few miles. So that's when the real effort sets in. As I said, cramp, if you're going to get cramp, it tends to be in that last bit of the race, and as I said, 5 of the 7 marathons I've done before this, I've suffered with cramp, so it's something I'm almost expecting in the back of my mind. And it tends to happen on that last bit, which I think is the best bit, but also the best supported bit. So that's the course. So to show you the next slide just gives you a bit of a breakdown on the times. I've got 2013 out there up till the finish. I said I wanted to be at 1:27 at halfway. I was 1:26.09, so halfway I knew I was on course. The one thing that sets it out for me above the other years is at that stage I was behind the 2 previous years, but by 35 kilometres I was ahead.
And that was just by pacing it correctly, planning it, and knowing where I wanted to be at each day. So I got to 40 kilometres, 2 minutes ahead of where I'd been the previous year. So I knew if I could just keep going that I was on for a good time. I managed, if I am in the end, to finish 2 hours 56. I was obviously disappointed not to break the 2:56, that extra second. It's always next year. But I think the key bit was the planning of it. It was getting to that stage without cramp, no cramp. I didn't stop once, so I was pleased with that. Very tired. I will say I was tired. I felt quite good going up to the finish, and as soon as I stopped, my legs decided they didn't want to move anymore. And at the end, there's a 400-metre walk down the mall, and that took me an absolute eternity to get down the mall, because my body did not want to go anywhere. And I think as well, the big thing I remember about this year is it's probably the happiest marathon I've ever done. Normally you go into it really worried about how things are going to go, but the support this year just seemed to a different level. And I think a lot of that was because of what happened at Boston Marathon as well. And I think a lot of people have said there's more supporters there this year than there has been other years. I think they were noisier, there was more support. And it's very hard not to smile when people are clapping and cheering you. To the extent that my face did ache a little bit again. And at one stage I said to Chris, who I was running with for a bit, I said, that's my last wave, I can't wave anymore. And I felt like I was using up too much energy waving back to people. But I did catch myself a few times still waving and milking it a little bit, really. But it was very good, I was very, very happy, and obviously very pleased with how that had gone. At the end, you get a little goodie bag with loads of little nibbles and stuff, which is always nice. You get a t-shirt, and you get a nice little medal to wear. That's now my 5th of those, because I've done 5 London, so it's always nice to have. And obviously that time gets me in for the next 2 years, so I will be doing it for the next 2 years. I'll just briefly show you where I finished. You probably won't be able to see that. I was 916th overall out of, what is it, 34,217 finished, and I was 916 in my age range of 40 to 44, although I will stress I'm at the 40. I was 193rd. So, and the ring bit that told me I was doing well, it says over the final 7 kilometres I overtook more people than passed me, so I knew I was still going quite well. There's still room for improvement. The winning time was 2 hours, 6 minutes and 4 seconds, so still a long way behind the winner, and if you ever see them run, they do run particularly quickly. So that's something to aim for, not. With regard to the other part of the thing, I'd obviously achieved the time that I wanted to achieve. Money-wise, with regard to the fundraising, I raised £1,228. So I was really pleased. And you know, it's really nice. I had lots of people sponsor me, which was really nice, at different amounts, but it's always nice to get that. I will say, I said at the start, I'm going to do it next year, and this year I was really desperately trying to find a local charity or a charity that helps a local person. So next year I will raise it with Angela, but if anybody knows of any local charities that would appreciate some money being raised for them, then I'm more than happy to run it for them. The only thing I would ask is that you allow me to send my sponsor form round to you. So I know Angela won't let you out of the building without sponsoring me. But that's it. That's really what I'd like to say. I've got a short video you can watch if you want. I'm just wary of the time, but I'll put that on. This is the London Marathon. This is not me running. This is the London Marathon course in 5 minutes. So it gives you an idea of where it goes. It's on race day, so you do get an idea of the crowds that are out there at certain bits as well, and how it really gets busy on the second half. I don't know if anybody's got any questions or anything they wanted to ask that I haven't covered.
Yeah, if you're running that fast, you're doing good.
This is in slow motion.
No, but I would stress, if you ever do get the chance to go down for a day, I know you all like your days out, it is busy and it is generally warm and stuff, but just to savour some of the atmosphere is something just worth watching.
Yes, next year.
You know when you are running,
Yeah.
and you said there that you stop and start walking.
Yeah.
What does it feel like to get running again?
How horrible. I was to say to you, the worst thing you can do is stop.
Is stop.
Because once you stop, your body doesn't want to go and your mind's telling you that you need to stop. And I always say, the longer you can keep going and get through that pain threshold, the better. If you have to stop, it's really because you have to stop, rather than stopping for a rest. I'd never recommend stopping early for a rest, if that makes sense, because once your body gets into the habit of slowing down, it doesn't want to go anymore.
Well, I've got a weak bladder.
Have I gone on that long?
That's what that tree was on there for.
I will say that is one of the biggest challenges, because they tell you to drink so much water that I'm bursting for the loop. And so I try and do it where I drink from, say, as soon as I get up, till about 8:30. Get all my fluid in so that I can get as much out of it before the start. So it's not a pleasant experience. The biggest queues you will ever see are for the toilets at the London Marathon. It's and yeah, they're not a pleasant experience, obviously. But yeah, it's really important to hydrate and have enough fluid in your body, and it's very hard to do that and not want to permanently go to the toilet, and you don't want to be stopping. Really.
Do you just have water, or have you got a special gun?
I do use, I have water. I tend to try and sip water at every mile, because they have water stations at every mile, but I use those gel bars every 5 miles, so that I'm storing up energy on those. But they also have Lucozade stations as well, I think it's 3 or 4 of those, so I try and just have a bit of those. But generally the mixture of the water and the gel bars is I just find if I try and do anything that's solid, I can't chew it, and you just can't swallow it when you're running. So yeah, try and keep it basic. But yeah, I think I'm trying to work out where that is. I think that's coming up to Canary Wharf, perhaps. On there. Any other questions?
When you're running the race, do you run to what you've trained for, or do you physically look for someone to latch on to help you along?
Yeah, totally to your plan. If you try and run somebody else's pace, it just doesn't work. And that's why you see a lot of probably the experienced runners always running generally on their own, because the important thing is not to try and attach on to somebody else. Because I had this plan this year of I had a range of 6 minutes 30 per mile to 6:45, and I knew if I go any quicker than that, I'm liable to blow up. If I go any slower than that, I'm liable not to break 3 hours. So you just have to run against your own clock.
So you concentrate on your own thing, what you're trying for.
Yeah, and it's very hard to try, and everybody's different, and you just can't run at the same pace. Myself and Andrew ran Edinburgh together, but that was a plan to do a certain time for Andrew, so I ran with him. But you just got to run your own race. Yeah. You can see the crowds building up now, but I still don't know where we are. One more question, if you want.
What celebrities did you pass, or passed you, or?
I followed Neil McAndrew the year before last for quite a bit, which was a pleasant experience. I did follow a man this year, which was one of my worst experiences. He was wearing a mankini, for anybody knows. His name was Nigel, and he was from Wales, and I knew that because he had Nigel on one buttock and Wales on the other. And that wasn't overly pleasant, but celebrity-wise, I ran. A couple of years ago, I ran up the embankment with James Cracknell, and there's a bit where you go in an underpass and then come out, and it goes really dark and quiet, and then you come out and there's the light, and the noise is just unbelievable. And running out there with James Cracknell, obviously being a celebrity, gets far more support. Probably the loudest cheer I've ever had. It was for me, but James Cracknell seemed to think it was for him as well. You do see Gordon Ramsay's been there. It's difficult. To be honest, the pace I run, not many celebrities run at that pace, so they tend to be further back in the pack. But you do see an awful lot of celebrities giving it a go. So
it's always good to see.
That's probably why you broke your own record, following that guy.
Yeah, I dared smile. I said I smiled a lot on that course, but that was the one bit I thought I dared smile, but I don't know. So I did put on a little spurt just to get in front of him and wait. But that really concludes my.
Wonderful.
Thank you.